Welcome to our Introduction to ELK Two-Way Wireless Technology webinar. I want to start by talking about the wireless options that are available for the M1. We have for quite some time now since supported traditional wireless. We have the M1 XRF EG receiver. That receiver is compatible with the GE format transmitters. And we also offer the M1 XRF 2H, which is compatible with the Honeywell 5800 series transmitters. Now, both of these options are one-way communication. So you have the transmitters or the sensors, and then you have a receiver that allows the M1 to get those transmissions from the sensors and interpret that and handle those. What we're offering now is a two-way wireless option. The receiver part number is the M1 XRF TW for two-way, and this is compatible with our own line of two-way wireless sensors. So those would be ELK manufactured sensors. And that's what we're going to talk about today is our new two-way option. Now, you may wonder why we chose to go into wireless, why we decided to develop our own wireless products. Wireless is a growing segment of our market. Recent statistics show about 48% of installs now include wireless. Some systems are now completely wireless. They don't have any hardwired sensors. So wireless is a really popular option that people are using for convenience, for retrofit installations, that sort of thing. So we felt like wireless was a good place for us to get into that market. We wanted to offer a wireless solution also that to go with our M1 product that was as robust as the M1 is. And so while we have those one-way options and those are great options, we wanted to offer something that was a little bit different, a little bit better, that we felt like would be a good addition to our M1 line. We also listen to customer feedback, people telling us what they want, and so we wanted to be able to offer a complete wireless solution that has some of the features that we've had requests for, and also, that is the quality product that our customers have come to expect from us. Now, how is our two-way wireless different? There are a number of different ways it's different, and we're going to go into each one of these in a bit of detail. So you've got positive signal acknowledgement, the 900 megahertz frequency, status LEDs, our auto sync option, and self-adjusting power, and our installer confidence feature, which I'll explain here in just a moment. Let's just go ahead and dive into these. So, positive signal acknowledgement, what do we mean by that? A one-way system, when the sensor's tripped, it has to just send multiple transmissions to the receiver, hoping that one of those get through. It doesn't know if the signal got through, so it just has to try a number of times, and, in hopes kind of that fire and pray type way of doing it. And then, the receiver can't tell the transmitter that it got the signal, so there's no acknowledgement there. But with the ELK wireless, when the sensor's tripped, the receiver notices that that's gotten a signal and then sends an acknowledgement back to that sensor to say, hey, I got that signal. So the sensor doesn't have to repeatedly send its transmission out for that single trip. It does it once, the receiver gets it, the receiver sends the acknowledgement, or I should be using the word transceiver here actually, because it is able to send and receive those signals. So it receives the signal and sends out that acknowledgement, and that's what makes it different. We get that positive signal acknowledgement. By the sensor only sending out its signal one time, it saves on battery power. It's just not consuming as much power because it's not having to send that signal out as many times. The 900 megahertz frequency is the frequency that we operate at, and that allows us to have long-range coverage. We also have a feature with the new two-way wireless that does frequency hopping. So it's not just 900 megahertz, but it's within a range of the 900 megahertz frequency that we can send out signals. This allows it to be a bit more reliable if it doesn't get through on one particular frequency, it can hop over to another one. It also makes it a lot more secure in that it would be much harder to try to jam it or defeat it, because you don't know exactly which frequency it's going to be sending on. So it's more reliable and a bit more secure there with the frequency hopping. We also have bicolor, two-color status LEDs, and this is on the sensors. You will see a green LED flash on the sensor when the signal is acknowledged. If you happen to see a red LED flash on the sensor, that would indicate that that sensor did not get the acknowledgement back. So you have that on the sensors. We also have key fobs that are two-way, and so you get status indication from those. A red indicates that the system's armed, green indicates it's disarmed, and flashing red indicates alarm memory.
Now I want to show you a quick demo. Pressing the blue number 3 button provides the current status. The red LED indicates the system is currently armed. I can disarm the system by pressing the green number 2 button, and the green LED shows the system is now disarmed. Pressing the yellow number 1 button will arm the system, and we can see the red LED indicating the system is armed. Now with the system fully armed, I will trip the sensor, and you can see the green acknowledged LED blink. I slowed this down in case you missed it. The keypad now displays burglar alarm. If I press the blue button on the key fob now, we'll get a red blinking, and that indicates alarm memory.
So let's talk for a moment about the auto sync option. What this does is allow the transceiver and the sensors to synchronize with one another. That allows the system to stay current. It keeps the system status accurate. This is a feature that you can disable, or you can have enabled on some sensors, or you could have it on all the sensors based on the sensor type. And the reason that we chose to do it that way is because of battery power. There are certain sensors that we have smaller batteries, and this feature does, because it's constantly active, it does cause the sensor to use a little bit more battery power. So we've made that programmable so that you can choose which sensor types you want to enable that on. So we will show you here in just a moment in ELK where you can make that selection. Self-adjusting power. The power level, the RF power level on the sensor can vary. So the sensor self-adjusts to use the minimum amount of power and still deliver a good clear signal. So whereas with traditional wireless, each time a transmission is sent from the sensor, it's using full power. With our two-way wireless, it doesn't need to do that. It adjusts and determines what power level it can send the signal and it still get through reliably and clearly, and it operates at that power level and makes adjustments as needed. So that helps it to be more energy efficient and use less power, which extends the battery life. The installer confidence feature. When you are learning in a sensor, when you first put the battery in, for 10 minutes after that battery installation, while you're going through that process of learning in manually, or when you've just powered the unit up by inserting the battery, it's operating at half power, 50% of the normal level. This allows you to go to the mounting location where you're going to install that sensor and test it, and you can by it being only at half power, you know that if it works then, it's going to work reliably during normal operation. So that gives you, a really good idea, a good good feel for the signal strength that you're getting, and that that sensor is going to be able to communicate with the transceiver unit reliably. If you run into a problem there, like if you have a very slow response or it doesn't seem like the signal's getting through, then you know you need to take a look at the placement of the transceiver. Could it be more centrally located, or if perhaps it's a very large installation, you may need to add additional receivers to increase the coverage area. But by running at that half power, you get that you know, just the confidence of knowing that it's going to work once you have it installed. Now let's talk about the products. Do we have any questions at this point, or do we need to elaborate on any of those features?
We don't have any questions so far, Amy, so you're doing a great job.
Okay, let's talk about the products that we have. Of course, we've got the transceiver that we've already talked a little bit about that part number, the M1XRF-TW, which is our M1 wireless transceiver. We also have a 4-button key fob, a slimline door window sensor, a mini window sensor, and a universal 3-zone sensor. And we'll go into just a little bit of detail on each one of these. So looking at the M1 wireless transceiver, this supports up to 144 zones or sensors. It connects to the M1 data bus, so it wires to the data bus just like the wireless receivers that we've been offering, you know, that connect to the data bus, the keypads, you know, any number of devices. You're pretty familiar with how the data bus operates. So it's the same thing there. Your 4-wire hookup or Cat5, whatever you're using, if you have a data bus hub, that sort of thing. Same rules apply for this device. You can have multiple transceivers. You could have up to 3 in addition to your first one, so a total of 4 transceivers could be installed on the M1 system to allow a large area to be covered, and you could cover quite a big area with 4 of these.
Amy, I know you're probably going to get into it, but the question of can you run both the GE and the new ELK wireless at the same time?
Yes, you can. You can have a mixed system if you want to. Say you've already got the GE installed and you want to add the wireless, or you just have some reason for needing both. You could have the GE and the two-way on the same system. There's just a few things that you would need to do to make that work correctly, and we're going to go into that here in a minute, so I won't go into a lot of detail at this particular time, but we'll talk more about what you have to take into consideration when you have a mixed system. And that also applies for the Honeywell. If you wanted to have the two-way and the Honeywell on the same system, you could do that. The 4-button key fob, either this is for arming, disarming, you can activate a panic. The button assignments are programmed in the M1 control, and when we go into the ELK here in just a moment, I'll show you how that's done. The Button 3, the blue button, is a status inquiry button. So if you press and hold that button for just a few seconds, you'll get an LED indication of the status. And we were talking about that just a moment ago. We were trying to show you a video. But so if you press the inquiry button and the system is armed, you're going to get a red LED. If it's disarmed, you're going to get a green LED. If there happens to be an alarm in memory, you're going to get that flashing LED. So you get that status indication. You can, tell the state of the system before you go in. So if, say, there's an alarm, you see that flashing LED, you'll know you may not want to go in the building at that time. This key fob has a welded case, which allows it to be more water resistant. It's extremely water resistant. If you drop it in a puddle, it's still going to work. The slimline door and window sensor, this is a very small unit. It can be installed very discreetly, and it's great for a lot of applications. This is probably one of our more versatile sensors that we offer. It's great for door and window applications. It has a single built-in reed switch, so there's no connection internally for this to have an external contact in. It's just the built-in reed switch, and it does have a front and back tamper option. If you want to have a tamper on it, you can do that. Our mini window sensor is definitely our thinnest sensor. It can be installed and be almost virtually unseen once it's installed. This is really good for non-metallic windows like a wood window or a vinyl window like a double hung or a casement style. Will be perfect for that. It has a built-in reed switch. Again, there's no internal terminals for an external device to be connected to this, so it's just this sensor, but with its very thin size, it's extremely discreet.
Amy, a question
Yes.
is the status indicator a unique feature, or is it available because of the bidirectional nature of our wireless?
Well, the bidirectional nature allows us to have that status indication. So when we're talking about a sensor, when you see that green LED blink on the sensor, that is not an indication that the sensor transmitted its signal, but rather that an acknowledgement was sent back to it. So when you see that green LED blink, you know that means that signal got through, and that is because of the the bidirectional communication. Kirk, would you need to elaborate on that any, or does that cover it, you think?
No, I think that explains it well.
Okay. Now, because this mini window sensor is so thin, it's very close to the surface that it's being mounted to, and that does somewhat affect the range. So we recommend mounting this particular sensor within 100 feet of the transceiver. That's still giving you a pretty good bit of range for this particular type of sensor, but we do make that recommendation on this particular one. We also
Amy,
offer...
Amy, I'm sorry. I don't know if you have it in front of you of what's the actual size of that sensor.
The physical size of that sensor, and we're talking about this mini, right? The physical dimensions of it are 1.1 inches wide by 2.3 inches long by 1/4 of an inch deep. That's the sensor part. The magnet is, it's about 0.37 inches by 2.3, the same length by the same depth, but the sensor itself is just a little over an inch wide. So it's pretty small. Okay, talking about this universal 3-zone sensor. It's great for anytime you have 3 openings that you want to cover, whether that be garage doors or multiple doors and windows. You can also connect environmental sensors, like say if you wanted to have like a water sensor or something like that that you wanted to incorporate into the system wirelessly, you could connect it to the terminals inside this unit. There's a built-in reed switch. You can learn this same sensor into 3 different zones, and the way that we make that work is through loop assignment. So the built-in reed switch is loop 2. To use it, you program as loop 2, and I'll show you how to do that here in a moment. The 2-zone inputs for the external contacts are loop 1 and loop 3, and they share a common negative between them. So learn it into 3 zones, set the loop number, and you have one sensor covering 3 different zones. And it also has the front and back tamper option. I'm going to get into some... Go ahead.
A question about the sensors. It says these sensors only send a signal to the panel when the connection is broken, correct? Not a continuous monitoring.
No, they're only sending the signal when they're tripped. They send that signal, wait for an acknowledgement. If they get the acknowledgement, they don't send the signal again. If it happens not to get the acknowledgement on the first transmission, it will try again to send the signal waiting for that acknowledgement. So you get those transmissions. There's also supervision transmissions that are sent periodically, just like a check-in with the transceiver to say, hey, I'm still here, and the transceiver acknowledges that, so that there is some supervision going on, but it's not constant. It's not 100% of the time. Let's talk a little bit about how this is set up. We're going to go over some installation tips now. The first thing that we want to talk about is the transceiver itself. When you're connecting that to the M1 system, just like other data bus devices, you need to set an address. The way that this is configured, you need to have this transceiver set at address 2. So that means it needs to be the first input expander type device on the system, set at address 2. If you happen to have additional transceivers to cover a larger area, then they need to be sequentially addressed following the first one. So if you have 2 of them, you're going to have 2 and 3. 3, you'd have 2, 3, and 4, so on. So a maximum number of transceivers you could have on the system would be 4. So if you did have 4, they would need to be set to address 2, 3, 4, and 5. You cannot have any hardwired zones in those groups occupied by the transceiver. So the groups, again, are associated with the addresses. All of your hardwired zones would need to come after that. On the 6022, which is the universal, you can have external contacts connected to that. We were just discussing that a moment ago. You can learn the sensor into 3 separate zones. By setting the loop number, you determine which part of that sensor is associated with that zone. Loop 1 and loop 3 are your external contact loops, and they share a common negative. By default, they're looking for a normally closed circuit, but if you do want to connect a normally open device to one of those loops, you can do so, but you need to enable option 1 in wireless setup, and I'll show you that here in just a moment. Okay, enrolling sensors. There's 2 different ways to do that. You can either do that manually through the keypad, or you can do it in the ELK software.
First, I'll show you how to enroll through the keypad. We're going to learn in a 6022, which is the universal sensor. The first thing you'll want to do is take the cover off the sensor and familiarize yourself with how the battery should be oriented. Positives to the left. And also look at the polarity of the battery. At the keypad, press the ELK key, then 9 and right arrow. Enter the installer code, default 172839. Then enter 14 to go to wireless setup, right arrow. And press 3 to go to learn wireless transmitter. Right arrow into that menu. I want to learn into zone 30, so I'll enter 030 and right arrow. And now it says push transmitter button. I'll insert the battery, and we'll get a chime acknowledgement and display on the keypad when this is learned in. It will automatically advance to the next zone. This is a feature to allow you to learn in multiple wireless zones without having to go back to the keypad each time, so that's a convenient feature for you. But I want to stop here, so I'm just going to press the ELK key, then down arrow back to zone 30. I want to set the loop number, so I'll press the left arrow key. I can see the loop 0. If I press the right arrow key, my cursor moves under the 0 so that I can change it to 2 in this case, which is for the internal read switch on this sensor. Then press the ELK key to save that and go back. Now I'll show you how to learn the sensor in through ELK.
Alright, so what I'm going to do is add a new wireless group in ELK. So I've just opened an account here. I've created this account, named it Two-Way Wireless for this training. This is your account details screen. On the left side you have your folder items. So to add a new wireless group, we're going to right-click on the word Zones Inputs, and you'll see we have new wireless zones. We're going to make that selection, and here's where you see your groups that I was talking about before. And so these groups are associated with addresses. When we're talking about hardwired zones, it's fixed. So if you have a hardwired input expander at address 6, then it is going to occupy zones 81 through 96. Wireless, you know, we have the 144 zones, so obviously the address is, you know, one of those groups, and you can have other groups after that that aren't necessarily associated with a physical device at that address. So we're going to set up group 2 here, zone 17 through 32. Just click OK there, and it will add your wireless zones in the system. Now, you know, to start out with, it's very similar to a wired zone. So let's just say we want this to be a door sensor, so we're just going to call this front door. If I could spell, it would help. And I'm just going to set that up as an entry-exit zone. I could set the attributes that I wanted for it, like if I want that zone to be bypassable, the area that I want it to be assigned in, you know, even set a voice description for it if I'd like to do that. So all that's basic stuff you would do for any zone. We have on our wireless zones, we have this wireless setup button. So if we click on that, we get this little wireless setup screen. Here you can key in the ID number, set the supervision, that sort of thing. So I have a sensor here, and on the sensor is a nice little label that shows you the ID number. It will be labeled TXID. You'll see this field here matches it. Now, one thing that you may notice right off when you're looking at the sensor is that the TXID has 6 characters on the label, and we're looking for 7 here. There's a leading 0 there. You can either enter it, or you can just put in the label that you see, you know, just as it's labeled, and it will add the 0 for you if you don't key it in. But there is a leading 0 there that you won't see on the label of the sensor. So you see, once I put in that TXID number, all these other numbers fill in. They're not anything that you're going to see match on your label. You're not going to see a DL or an HID number label on your sensor, just the TXID. But we do have this option here for the loop number, and that's where we would want to make that assignment of, you know, what part of, if we're talking about the universal, the 6022, which part of that sensor is associated with this zone. So let's say this is the read switch. We want to set that to loop 2 and then click Save. And so now we've basically learned this sensor into the system. We would need to send that information to the control. Then it would be learned in. And we could go put that same ID number in for 18 and 19 if we wanted to use loop 1 and 2, the external, or excuse me, 1 and 3, the external loops off of that sensor. We just learn those into a different zone. Under your wireless setup here, you'll have a list on your transmitters tab of all of the sensors that you've learned in. Oh, let me go back just one second here. We were saying, I'll just learn this into another zone. We'll just say this is a window. And we're going to make it a perimeter zone, and we're going to put in that same ID number here. And this one I'm going to set to loop 1 because I want to use the external contact on it. Say for that this particular device is normally open instead of normally closed. That's when I would want to check this option 2 here to allow that external device to be normally open. If I leave that unchecked, the sensor is going to expect a normally closed circuit. So that's how you can make that determination. Again, going back into the wireless setup, you just get a kind of an overview of that, and you can see now where this one has option 2 selected, whereas the other one does not. On your wireless setup, you have a Keyfob Events tab here. This is where you're going to choose what the buttons on the key fob do. Now, by default, button 1 is your arm away, button 2 is disarm, and that corresponds with the labeling on those buttons, so that's already set up for you. But say button 4, which was the red button, say we wanted that to be a panic, we could go here and select a different, a definition for that. Say we wanted it to be a police alarm or police no indication if you want it to be a silent panic, and you can just make that selection here. So button 3 is your status inquiry button, but you can also assign another function to that button if you wanted it to do something else. Let's say, for instance, we wanted it to activate an automation task that turns on some lights. We could select that here. Now, pressing and holding that button in for just a couple seconds is going to give you your status inquiry, but if we pressed and held that button in for longer amount of time, several seconds, I think it's at least 5 to 7 seconds holding that button in, then it would activate this automation task. So that's one way that you can assign button functions through this screen. You can also write rules. So say I didn't necessarily want to have this be an automation task, I could leave this disabled, and then I could go down here into the rules section and write a rule. So we're just going to start a new rule. It says whenever, and we have keypad F key press. Excuse me, that's the wrong thing. Whenever key fob button press. And then we can select button 3, and we can say whenever button 3 is activated, then we want to turn on a light. We'll turn on light 1. So you can write rules for the buttons as well. Just keep in mind you don't want to have a conflict between what you have on the wireless setup screen and what you're doing in your rules, so it's important to make note of how you've got that set up. One other thing I wanted to show you here in ELK RP in the global section on the special tab, this is where you can adjust the auto sync feature. By default it's going to be disabled. That allows for maximum battery life, but you don't have the auto syncing going on. If you want to have auto sync enabled, you can enable it for type B sensors, which would be like your 6020 and your 6022. Those are the larger ones. You've got the universal and then the slim line. Those are considered type B, or you can have it for type B and type C. Type C sensors being that thin mini window sensor. We really don't recommend enabling it for type C sensors because it is such a small sensor, it has a small battery, you're going to reduce your battery life, and that's something we don't really recommend for that particular type of sensor.
Amy, we do have a question.
Okay.
It says, once you get the wireless zones in first, how do you handle add-ons at a later date to a hardwire system since you're already using the lower zones?
Okay, so if you are running into a situation where, say, you have a hardwired input expander already set up at address 2 and you've decided to go back into this particular system and add wireless, add the two-way wireless to it, you have to have that two-way wireless transceiver set at address 2. So you're going to have to move your hardwired input expander to a higher address. Now that does involve a process of removing it from the software and then adding it back into another address, which is, in the software it's not extremely difficult to do that. With the software makes it pretty easy to program zones, but it is something you have to do manually. So it's a process of removing the hardwired group 2 and moving that to a higher group number, like 6 or above if you're going to have multiple transceivers. If it's a smaller job and you know you're only going to have the one transceiver and you want 16 wireless zones, then it's okay to have a hardwired input expander at address 3. But we say always, think it through. Do you think that you may need to have more wireless later? And go ahead and leave some padding, leave some space in there for you to expand the system. Start your hardwired a little bit higher address, and that way you don't have to repeat that process over and over again. You do it the one time, you've left yourself some space, you'll be fine.
I mean, there's several general questions on range on the different sensors. I want to just cover range.
Okay. Again, on the 6021, which is that mini door window, or excuse me, we recommend it for Windows, mini window sensor. We recommend that be mounted within about 100 feet or so of the transceiver. With your other sensors, they're larger, they have larger batteries and different designs, so their range is a little bit more. You have, I would say, closer to around maybe 500, 600 feet with those. You have to keep in mind that it's really hard to pin down an exact number on wireless because the environment makes a big difference there. If you have a number of, floors or walls in between the transceiver and the sensor, then that's affecting the range of that particular device because there's the obstructions in between, and that can even vary on building materials. So it makes it really hard to pin down a number, but like I said, roughly 500-600 feet. Kirk, would you want to elaborate on that any? I know that you can.
I think that covers the question. That's I think you covered it well.
Okay. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the, technical features of the wireless and what makes it different and everything, but you want to know why your customers would want this. Why are they going to want you to put this product in their installation? Two-way wireless key fobs are very convenient when you have that feature of being able to check the system status, whether it's just that assurance with that LED and knowing that that means that something's actually happened. When you press that arm button on your key fob that it actually armed the system, or when you get home before you go in, you want to make sure that there's not been an alarm. That's just a very convenient feature and gives you a lot of peace of mind of knowing that it's doing what it's supposed to. With the one-way wireless, they may have an LED on the key fob, but it basically just means that the signal was sent out. You can't really be sure that it was performed. If you press the arm button, did it really arm the system? And so that is a super convenient feature that I know I would want, and I'm sure that your customers want that as well. Also, with the two-way wireless, you just have that increased confidence because it's more like a hardwired system where you've got these, checks and balances of, signal being sent and that acknowledgement and knowing that signals are getting through. It's a lot more like a hardwired system than your traditional wireless would be, and so that makes it more reliable and gives you that feeling of more security. The home's more secure because you know that wireless is working and that you've got that acknowledgement going on with your signals. And also the extended battery life, because we're not having to blast out 8 pulses at full power every time the sensor's tripped. The battery's not being taxed as much. There's not as much power consumption, so that allows the battery to last longer, and nobody likes going and changing batteries frequently, so that's something your customers will definitely want. It's energy efficient and everybody loves that. I mean, that's something that we're all being conscious of now is energy consumption, and batteries and sensors applies to that, so that's something your customers definitely want.
Amy, as far as the battery, we did have a question. What happens as a battery starts to go dead? Do you get a sensor? Do you get an indicator?
Absolutely. You are going to get a low battery indication when that battery starts to get weak. The system is going to notify you of that. There's going to be a display on the keypad that gets logged and can be reported so that the installer can be notified of it, and then schedule a service call with that customer to take care of that issue for them. So definitely going to know when the battery needs to be replaced well before it happens. All right, what's next? We've talked about the sensors that we've released. What we are looking toward the future with this roadmap is additional sensors for this product line, and that includes a motion detector, a smoke detector. We're also looking at a glass break, a water sensor, a temperature sensor, and a number of other things that we're looking forward to adding to this line. So it's going to just continue to grow as a product line and be a full offering for the M1 system. We do have an introductory special available through the end of September. If you buy 10 sensors or key fobs, you will get the transceiver unit free. So that's something that we're running through the end of September. We've got a good month or more left on that introductory special, so definitely take advantage of that. And if you have any questions about that, you can definitely call our sales department or talk to your local sales rep. All right, we just want to open it up now to any questions that we haven't addressed. If you have a question, please feel free to ask. We want to make sure that if this is beneficial for you and that you get all the information that you need. So get those questions coming in.
Okay, Amy, we'll just start through some of the ones that we have. First, can you give an example of how you would use an application for that universal sensor?
Okay, well, you may have several windows that you want to cover. You can have the sensor itself mounted covering one of the windows and then covering the other two windows. Like if you want to have that separation of knowing which window was open, you can have additional sensors there. Another application that I think it would be really great for, you know, a garage area where say you have a door and you might want to install it on the door, and then have a good garage door sensor, because you can't use a traditional type sensor on a garage door. It just doesn't really work well. So you want to have that specialized type garage door sensor. But say you don't want to run that all the way back to the control panel, it's not possible, or it's just something that you would prefer not to do, you can have it connected to this. So really any time that you want to have a sensor, be a wireless sensor, but you need something specialized like that garage door, like maybe an environmental sensor if you want to have a water sensor, don't want to run it all the way back to the panel. Kurt, can you think of any other examples? I'm sure you probably can.
I think you covered it.
Okay.
Okay, a couple questions concerning key fobs, Amy. One was, what's the maximum number of key fobs you could use? And the second one, does the key fob button 3 have any programmable function besides status?
Okay. The wireless transceiver supports up to 144 wireless zones. 144 wireless zones is the maximum number of zones that the M1 system can support, just generally speaking. So technically you could have all 144 of those be key fobs if you needed to. I doubt that's the case, but there's not like a cap on the number of those wireless zones that could be key fobs. So really as many as you need within the capacity of the system with all of the other wireless sensors that you're going to be having on the system up to that 144. Through wireless key fob button 3, and I'll just come back to this screen here in ELK where we're setting the button assignment. Just inherent in the design of that key fob, that button, if you press it for just a couple seconds, is a status indication. But if you press and hold that button in, you can get additional functionality out of that button. So if you press and hold it for several seconds, about 4 or 5 seconds, then you're going to be able to activate whatever you've programmed here. Again, that could be if you wanted to have some kind of panic, or in the example I was showing earlier, it could be an automation task, or you can have rules written to define what the button does. So the short press gives you the status inquiry. A press and hold will allow it to activate whatever feature you've programmed into the system for it to do.
Okay, a couple more key fob questions. Can you uniquely identify the user by the key fob?
You can. If we go back here to the wireless setup, let's just go here to zone 19, and we're going to make this a key fob. So we say that's, let's even be more specific and say that's Amy's key fob. We need to set the definition here to key fob. And then when we go into the wireless setup here, we'd put in the the ID number, or we can learn that in through the keypad and then receive that information. But you have an option here for keypad user ID. So if I'm user 1 in the system, I can actually set this key fob user ID to user 1, and for the purpose of logging and reporting, that this key fob could be associated with my user 1. So you can have that association with the user number, and it is possible to have that associated with the user number that you don't necessarily have a user programmed into the system if you just want to have that identified as a different number. So anywhere from 1 to 255, and if you have it set to 199, isn't that disabled? I thought it actually said that somewhere, that it wouldn't log it. Am I missing something there, Kirk, or will it log as 199?
It will log as whatever you type in there.
Okay. Yeah, so you can have that associated with the user just by programming it here on this screen. Did we have any other questions?
Okay. Can the buttons on the key fob be assigned differently between the users, or does it have to be universal?
The key fob button assignments are universal. It's not different for each key fob. So what you program in to your wireless setup is how the key fob's going to operate. And that would be all of the key fobs on the system. Multiple key fobs, they're all going to operate the same way.
And one more key fob question. Do buttons 1, 2, and 4 allow for additional programmability if there's a longer button hold like button 3?
No. No, they don't. That is unique to button 3 because it is the status inquiry button.
Okay, Amy, we've answered most of the questions. We've got a couple that we'll try to get back to later. Or if you have other questions that you think of, please contact tech support afterwards. We would love for you, Amy, to maybe try those videos one more time. We're wondering if you actually get out of the PowerPoint and see if we can see the video. I hate for the folks to miss that one, especially the one with the LEDs.
Okay, let me see what I can do here. Are you seeing anything there?
No, we're not. So yeah, we will definitely work on that. Obviously that worked yesterday when we were putting this together, so we're not sure. Someone said try full screen. I'm not sure that'll work, but we could try it.
Okay, there's full screen. Do you see anything?
We're still not seeing it. We will make sure that those are part of the follow-up because I think they were really good and beneficial if we could see them. But we definitely appreciate everyone joining us today. We thank Amy for doing a great job. Like I said, we'll follow up with a copy of the PowerPoint. We'll include those extra videos, and we just appreciate you taking your time and spending it with us this afternoon. And thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Beth, and I hope everyone has a wonderful Friday and a great weekend.